Okay, so we're going to look through the worksheet for identifying grammatical differences, which you can still find online. Here's the first one. And I'll put the grammatical term at the top and highlight the part that's been changed and use the term to describe what has been changed. So here we've got the subordinate clause, which is the phrase in red, the clause in red, when asked to write this, and that's been removed from the second sentence. Next we've got a case of subject-verb agreement or disagreement in the first sentence. Here's the subject, the first thing that came into my head. And notice this is just one thing came into my head. In the first sentence we have the verb were, which is for more than one, and in the second was, which is just for one. So you have in the second sentence you have subject-verb agreement, and in the first sentence you don't have subject-verb agreement. If you look at the blue phrase here, we have nouns. The showers is a plural noun, and the ritual is a singular noun. And it might sound more comfortable to have a singular noun after was. Okay, and the if we notice here, we've got in the first sentence the showers. In the second sentence, we've got the ritual of having showers. In the second sentence, the phrase of having showers, notice that it's got a preposition at the front of, the ritual of doing something or other. And then we have the participle of the verb have. And I'm using, in the second sentence, showers as the object of the verb have, to have a shower, have showers. Okay, here are the next two sentences. The first one has a comment clause at the beginning, which has been taken out of the second. However, is an example of a clause, which in this case just one word. Some grammar books, of course, have different names for these things. They can be called discourse markers, sentence adverbials, different things, unfortunately. But in the grammar book we were using, they are called comment clauses. And what they do is they add a comment on what comes after it. They don't add any information, but they just add a comment. So you'll see that actually the sentence has the same meaning in the second version. It's just not connected to what has come before it, which you can't see here because you don't have the sentence in context. In the second sentence, the one beneath, we have a very clear example of a relative clause. Actually, both sentences have a relative clause in them. It's just that the words who was can be taken away, and they have been in the first sentence, so you might not have recognized that this is a relative clause. What words have been taken away? Well, the word who is a relative pronoun, and that's been taken away with that phrase. If you take who away, you've got to take, you'll feel that you've got to take was away as well. Another change. In the first sentence, The teacher, Mr. Forshaw, had an ingenious way of explaining, and in the second he had an ingenious explanation. The word explanation is an abstract noun, so the verb explain, a way of explaining, a way of doing something, a way of explaining, the verb explain has been turned into an abstract noun. Oh, and I haven't said anything about the fact that the sentence has of course been divided in two in the second version, with a full stop after the relative clause. Okay, here's the next pair of sentences. What you'll notice is that the second has that in it, which is being used as a pronoun here. If I replace that with the phrase, the noun phrase it's replacing, I'd say this: my worst school memory is the memory of being told off, blah, blah, blah. Sounds okay without that, but there's another way of writing it in any case. Now, like a couple of sentences back, we've got the preposition, in this case of, and that's followed by a participle. But there's more to say about this if you have a look. Now, the sentence that's been incorporated here is something like at the bottom: my teacher tells me off, my teacher told me off. If you look at that, what we have is my teacher as the subject, and then we have a multi-word verb or phrasal verb, tell off, and the object, you'll notice, goes in between the verb and the particle off in tell off. Off is called a particle. Now, we didn't do what are called causatives. A causative is a phrase which expresses the fact that you've, as it were, caused someone to do something. So, for example, like I can say, I got the hairdresser to shave all my hair off. Like I caused the hairdresser to do it. I can also say I had the hairdresser shave all my hair off. In the same sense, I'm causing the hairdresser to do something. What we've got in the first sentence is a causative structure, which is very similar to a passive structure. In the second sentence, what we've got is a passive structure. Being told off by my Year 7 teacher. If you look at the sentence at the bottom, my teacher tells me off, there you've got an active sentence. To make it passive, I'd say, I am told off by my teacher. Okay, in any case, we have a passive construction in the second sentence and what's called a causative in the first. So having my Year 7 teacher telling me off is a causative structure, like I had the hairdresser shave all my hair off. A little change here. I don't know what you'll think of this. In the first sentence, we've got Year 7 teacher. There you can see Year 7. In the second, I've got the words Year 7 joined by a hyphen, and this is one way of turning that phrase into an adjective. Of course, you wouldn't hear this just listening to someone read the sentence, but you can see in the second sentence with the hyphen connecting two words, it's very clearly being used as an adjective to describe the teacher. Sounds a bit funny to say that, but if you think, what kind of teacher? A Year 7 teacher. Next sentences. Okay, so the phrases here, what's been highlighted, these are subordinate clauses. The same clause, more or less, when we analysed poetry, whenever we analysed poetry. The word in red is a conjunction. Notice that the second sentence with whenever has a conjunction which is a little bit more informative than the conjunction in the first. When covers a lot of things. I'll phone you, think about this, I'll phone you when I get home. Sounds fine. You couldn't say, I'll phone you whenever I get home. Well, maybe you could actually, but think about how the meaning is a little bit different from whenever in the second sentence. Whenever in the second sentence means something like every single time without fail, something like this. And you can see that I've put a comma after the subordinate clause, which is not an absolutely strict rule, but it's preferred when the subordinate clause is fairly long, and I guess this is fairly long. Okay, if you look at the top sentence, it says a phrase indicate a meaning. Look at the word indicate here. In the sentence at the bottom of the screen, I've got a certain phrase indicates a certain meaning, and you see I've changed indicate to indicates. I'm sure this is just a typing mistake in the original text, but here we've got a problem with, we could say with tense, because we're thinking about this in a in what sort of tense though? Something like a present tense, but I don't want to get too much into that because of the would in the sentence. Anyway, skipping past that, you'll see that in the sentence at the bottom, I don't have any red here. I've got just one long blue phrase, and what we've got here is a noun phrase. I'll say a bit more about this. Now, look, instead of indicate, I've got indicating, and I've got a certain phrases indicating a certain meaning. Now, we talked about that a little bit in class, and maybe it sounds a bit strange, a certain phrases, you can see the S and the apostrophe here. We've got the apostrophe S because what comes after it, indicating a certain meaning, is all part of one long noun phrase. If you listen to this version of the sentence, here we go. Whenever we analysed poetry, my teacher would make comments about something, which always left me thinking, but where did he get that from? Now that whole phrase, a certain phrases indicating a certain meaning, that whole phrase in blue in the second sentence is taking the place of, could take the place of something, a single word, a noun or a pronoun. Now because of that, we have that apostrophe after phrase, the word phrase. Okay. And you can see that instead of using the conjunction and, with and I would sit there and think, what I've done is used a, blimey, restrictive relative clause. So you could end the sentence before that clause. Whenever we analyse poetry, my teacher would make comments about certain phrases indicating a certain meaning, full stop. But what I've got here is a relative clause which comments on what's gone before it, the thing that my teacher would do, which always left me thinking something. Okay, restrictive in the bottom sentence, a restrictive relative clause. And we can see just a few things about punctuation. We have a colon in the second sentence introducing reported speech, and for no reason at all I've changed double quotation marks to single quotation marks. I don't know which you prefer, but whichever you prefer you can have. Okay, the next sentences. You'll see that in the first phrase at the bottom I've got being, making a a clause there, being a creature of habit. Now that's not a complete sentence, being a creature of habit. Being a creature of habit is just a part of a sentence, a clause that can't stand alone. So it makes sense to have a comma after that. Notice that in the sentence at the top you could have a full stop after habit. I am a creature of habit, full stop. And we talked about the fact that if you can put a full stop in, you shouldn't have a comma. You can have a semicolon if you like, but it's not good to have a comma here. But in the second sentence it's fine because I've turned it into a clause using the participle being a creature of habit. Look at the object for the verb prefer. In the first sentence the object is constancy. In the second sentence the object is things to be constant. What's the difference? Well, in the first sentence, constancy, we have an abstract noun which has been turned into an adjective in the second sentence, joined to things with to be, things to be constant. So we've got the word things as the main part of the object there, and then the adjective constant adding a bit of extra information about it. Not just a bit of extra information, crucial information, otherwise it wouldn't be saying very much, would it? Being a creature of habit, I prefer things. Constant is important, but it's the way I've written it in the second case is to use constant as an adjective rather than as an abstract noun in I prefer constancy. Okay, the next two sentences. We have a slight difference in the subject here, my last school day, and then we have my last day at school. No, just a slight difference there. I'm not sure if this is one of the grammatical terms coming up in the box at the top, I can't remember, but notice that my last school day is what's called a compound noun. We've got the noun school and the noun day, and they go together, school day. And then last is an adjective, my last school day. What kind of school day? My last school day. Whereas in the second phrase, we've got my last day, adjective last, noun day, and then we've got at school, and that's an adverbial, at school. Where was your last day? At school. So there's different stuff going on in the subject here, and just, marvel at how much we can say about that tiny little change. Okay. Comparative adjective. We've got a long word here, poignant. A shorter adjective, poignant is an adjective, a shorter adjective like tall, the comparative adjective would have er at the end. Tall, taller, tallest. But for longer adjectives with two or more syllables in, but I don't want to pretend there's a clear rule here when there isn't. But for longer adjectives, we make the comparison by more. We say poignant, more poignant, and then the superlative is the most poignant, as opposed to tall, taller for the comparative, and then tallest, the tallest for what's called the superlative. In any case, what I've done here is stick in the second sentence to the basic way of forming a comparative phrase. More poignant than any other. Okay, the next sentences. Notice that in the first sentence the word smell is being used as a verb, It's in the base form here. That's the form of the infinitive without to. What comes before it could is, as I'm sure you'll recognise, it is a modal verb and it expresses ability. I was able to smell, I could smell. Whereas in the second sentence, what we've got is I was struck by, and then you have a thing, right? I was struck by a hammer on my head. I was struck by the smell. It's not being used as a verb anymore, but as a noun in the second sentence. So we've got something else to say here about then those two constructions. We've got the verb could smell in the first sentence, and then that phrase in blue, lovely fish fingers, sponge cake with pink custard, that's the object. What could you smell? Lovely fish fingers, sponge cake with pink custard. What we've got in the second sentence is a passive construction, another passive construction. Notice I could change this round and say, the smell of lovely fish fingers struck me. What did the striking? The smell of lovely fish fingers. A hammer struck me, or somebody struck me with a hammer. The smell struck me. But I've got it in the passive here, was struck by something, by the smell of lovely fish fingers. Compound noun, yes. A few slides back we had school days as a compound noun, and here we've got fish fingers. Fish is a noun, finger is a noun, fish finger, two nouns together, and these make really just one noun. This is worth pointing out because if we're looking at the list here, I could smell lovely fish fingers. Well, in the first sentence the word lovely is an adjective, and it shouldn't be separated by a comma there. Lovely fish fingers, lovely something. And then we've got the second item, which is sponge cake, actually another compound noun. And that's it, 2 items in this list. And that means that we'd have to rethink the commas in the first sentence and maybe put an and in. I could smell lovely fish fingers and sponge cake. Okay. We have a hyphen in the first sentence, and that's what you get if you just type that key on your keyboard. And notice it's joined together with custard there. And now that's a typing mistake, a punctuation mistake. If you're using a PC and you put a space and then a hyphen, another space, and then do the next word, when you put a space, when you touch the space bar after the next word, then that hyphen should automatically extend into a dash, so it will look like the sentence at the bottom of the screen. With a longer, you see a longer line and then a space on either side. If you're using a Mac, that I don't think it does an autocorrect. I'm not sure. That will depend on your computer. But notice here, to be correct, we have to use a dash, not a hyphen. Okay, and you'll see that what I've got here is that second phrase about custard, sponge cake with custard, in parentheses. The singular is parenthesis, that's one bracket. If you want the plural, you change the I of parenthesis into an E and you get parentheses. That's a fancy word for brackets. And I, of course, have chopped off the last bit of the sentence. Well, I did put this on the worksheet, relative clause, so I should probably mention it. In the parenthesis there, in the phrase in parentheses, I've got to be. I could change this to be clearly a relative clause. If you listen to this, I was struck by the smell of lovely fish fingers, which were to be followed. Which were to be followed. I've taken the which were out because you don't really need it, but this would still be a relative clause. If that makes no sense at all, don't worry about it, but you can pursue this point in a grammar book if you like. Okay, the next two sentences. Typing mistake in the slide. That should not say abjective, that should say adjective. If you can see at the top, we have an abstract noun in the first sentence, which is gratitude. That's a noun. So you think of, if you think about this, I filled my pockets with coins, with change, with what else can you fill your pockets with? I don't know. With things. That's a noun there. But gratitude isn't the sort of thing you can kick or smell or throw out of the window. So it is an abstract noun. And in the second version of the sentence, instead of gratitude, you've got grateful, which is not an adjective, as it says at the top, because there is no such creature, but an adjective. Subordinate clause, yes. We've got when I reflect on my school days, when I reflect on my school days. We've got the when there, which is the conjunction. Just notice that we have a comma after the subordinate clause in the second version of the sentence, which is to be preferred. It's not a strict rule, but it is to be preferred. You can decide for yourself, but I think you may agree that the subordinate clause is a bit easier to read. The sentence is a bit easier to read with a comma. Of course, I say of course, but if we swap around the order of the clause, if I say, I am grateful that my experience was mainly positive when I reflect on my school days, when the main clause goes at the front, at the beginning of the sentence, and is followed by the subordinate clause, then we typically do not have a comma. Okay, the next sentences. Quite a lot of changes in the second one. Remember, as I said in class and on the worksheet, I say again that not every change here is supposed to be a correction, but if we can describe how the things are changing, we have more control over how we put sentences together. That's the idea. Should have said that at the beginning, perhaps. But just to talk about the changes, we've got, if you look at the top sentence, a subordinate clause here. Whilst playing, we could have a comma after that. Whilst playing, but we couldn't really have a comma just because of the sentence. You'll see what I mean as I go along. Whilst playing, I felt empowered. Or you could say, I felt empowered whilst playing. But notice we've got another subordinate clause here, when I had possession of the ball. The first one covers everything else. Whilst playing, comma, we could put, I felt empowered when I had possession of the ball. So we've got the main clause, which sort of includes a subordinate clause. The main clause is, I felt empowered when I had possession of the ball. But the main clause has a subordinate clause in it. So you've got two subordinate clauses. I could say, when I had possession of the ball, I felt empowered. You see how I'm switching that around? This is potentially confusing. So there are some changes in the second. But I just say potentially. I'm not saying that it's a mistake to do what's done in the first sentence. I think it's very easy to read the sentence. Doesn't cause any problems. But in any case, I have made some changes to avoid any possible confusion or whatever. So if you look, what have I got? I'm going to have to wait a while to explain what I've got, because I've got these in the wrong order. If we look at empowered and empowering, these are going after a verb. In the first sentence, felt, and in the second, was. And the verb felt and the verb was going after a subject. Look at how this has been changed. In the first sentence, it says I felt empowered. In the second, it says it was empowering. What was empowering? Well, to have possession of the ball was empowering. The it is looking forward to that information that comes later in the sentence. It's setting it up, it's making you wonder what's coming next. So there's a change there to the subject of that phrase, which is what I've done to help rewrite the second sentence. I'm getting very long-winded, excuse me. Now the word empower is a verb, and empowered is the past participle of to empower, and empowering is the present participle of the verb to empower. Very often we can use the past participle and present participle of a verb as an adjective, which is what's going on here. Think about the verb bore. So, he bored me silly. He bores me. Every time I speak to him, he bores me. Or excites, or whatever you like instead. The film excited me, you can say. If you change the verb into the past and present participles, it becomes an adjective. So you could say, I am bored, he is boring. I am excited, the film is exciting. In this case, I was empowered, I felt empowered, something was empowering. Okay. And what we've got here to cover the second subordinate clause in the top sentence, the one that goes, when I had possession of the ball. Whilst playing, I mean the first subordinate clause, whilst playing. What I've got in the second sentence is an adverbial, during a game. That's expressing the same thing, but it's using, instead of a subordinate clause, it's using an adverbial. So that gets around the problem of having, if it's a problem, of having two subordinate clauses in the first sentence. Okay, that was a lot, that last one. Number 10. And this is the last. Not much to say about this one, just one point which did come up once in class and is something that you may have thought about before. If you have a look at this, in the first sentence, we have what's called a reflexive pronoun. Now, reflexive, if you think about this like a reflection in a mirror, it somehow reflects back, refers back, or in some sense to something. To what? To the person speaking, the person saying the sentence. So think about this, a very clearly reflexive use of myself. I shaved myself. I cut myself. Myself refers in those sentences back to the I. I shaved myself. He shaved himself. They shaved themselves. They fed themselves. The pronouns in those sentences are referring back to the subject of the sentence, the one person doing the speaking. It's pretty clear. Now the problem, and it is a bit of a problem in the first sentence, is that there's nothing that the reflexive pronoun is referring back to. So you could just say my friends and I. The pronoun in the second sentence, I, doesn't have to be reflexive, and actually it's better if it's not reflexive, because we use the reflexive pronoun to refer back to, often to refer back to the subject of the sentence, but to refer back in some way to the speaker or something like that. Sorry, that's very vague, but we'd have to look at a lot of examples to form a general rule that covers all of them. Okay, the last thing, and this is just a question of style, and then the correctness of style would depend on the context of the text. if you were writing for something, I don't know, like a magazine or email to somebody or something, I don't know, that you wanted punch, a review of something, supposed to be punchy and conversational, then the exclamation mark would be very appropriate. More neutrally and a bit boringly in the second sentence, I've taken it out and I've just got a full stop. Not because there's anything wrong with the exclamation mark, but just to be neutral and boring and plain sailing and safe. But the issue of style here would just be whether or not you're writing a text which... how did that arrow come? And I've forgotten what I'm saying. Yes, the exclamation mark for a question of style. Now, I hope that made sense, some of that. If you've got any questions, please feel free to email me and ask, and I'll try and answer more concisely and clearly than I've just managed.